I'm Jim Collison and live from Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 2, recorded on March 24th, 2016. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths Finder themes, one theme at a time, and today's theme is connectedness. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during the webcast, we do have a live chat room, and for Adam, for you, it's right below the main video window there. He loves when I do this, when I go like this in the camera. Yeah, right below the main video window is a chat room. We'd love to have you log in. Super easy to do that. Just there's a login button bottom left, and choose that. Choose the guest account. Put in your name. Take out the number. Hit login and you're in. No new account to create. You can just join us. Get your questions live. Today it's going to be really important to get your questions in because I'm not sure we'll have time for live callers at the end. But a great way to interact with us and get your questions in. If you're listening to the recorded version or you need custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, contact us. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, gallupstrengthscenter.com. For all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder training needs, you can also catch the video in both streaming and now downloadable audio. I just talked to a whole class. We have an ASC course, right, the advanced coaching course going on here in Omaha. Just talked to a whole class about how to get on podcasting. And if you're listening to only the video of this, you can get it every week on audio and recapture that time in a car, on a train, in a plane. Subscribe to it. It'll automatically come to you when they become available. It's just super easy in the way to get it done. All the options to get that done are on the coach's blog. We have a whole list of all our social media. Everything is out there. Coaching.gallup.com. Micah Librant is our host today. She's one of my favorite learning and development consultants. I wrote that in, so I'm going to say it every week now, Micah.
Yes!
One of my favorite learning and development consultants. Don't tell Heather write that, though, or Jeremy Pedrosini. Here at Gallup, and Micah, it's always great to see you, and welcome to another Theme Thursday.
Take that. Thanks. I'm so happy to be here. I am really pumped about connectedness. I think it was meant to be that I'm your favorite because we're meant to be talking about this one.
Yeah, no, and today we'll tie a lot of things together, right? We'll make the connection. So let's dig in a little bit. We've got a companion guide that's available for you. Again, if you haven't gotten access to that, every one we've produced is out at the coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com, and if you go to the GWSW tab, they're all available there. Take some time. If you're listening to the recorded version, stop right now. Just hit stop. Go download it so you have it available. You'll want to have it, and then come back and push play. Micah, lead us through. Let's talk about connectedness.
Connectedness. It's number 6 for me, and it's about seeing, thinking, feeling, and believing in the links between everything. Connectedness and belief. I see this question in the chat room right now, so I'll just address it. In the early development of StrengthsFinder, connectedness and belief as themes. So remember, a theme is a cluster of a group of common talents. Talents are the smallest piece. They cluster into themes, and then themes, when they're used productively, become strengths. The talents for connectedness and the talents for belief were combined, and it was called spirituality. Neither connectedness nor belief need to have a faith slant to them, and so it might be a little bit of a misguiding term, and we realize that they are different talents that can stand on their own, so those were separated into 2 different pieces. But very often when you speak with people with high connectedness, they might describe it as being a spiritual piece or perhaps a mystical thing, but I've also coached many people who say it's not about that at all. It's more about my understanding of economics or my understanding of human behavior. The thing about connectedness that sets it apart from anything else is it's about engaging with, studying, and being fascinated by and curious about the links between people, the links between ideas, the links between happenings. I spoke with Gallup certified coach Lisa Penn in order to prepare me for this because, again, it was just one of those, I knew we were talking about connectedness, and I knew she was exactly who I had to talk to really get my head in the game. And funny enough, I received a text message and an email from her on something totally unrelated last week, and I thought, well, that was certainly a connectedness moment for me of understanding that this was somehow meant to be. So if you take a look at that companion guide, that will walk us through really what connectedness means. Again, the first Few sentences are the short definition. That's the same definition that's on the theme sequence report and the Clifton Strengths Finder quick reference guide. It says people exceptionally talented in the connectedness theme have faith in the links among all things. They believe there are a few coincidences, that almost every event has meaning. What gives that power and edge is it's the ability to build bridges between people in groups, between individuals and individuals, showing how they can relate to and rely on each other. They can find meaning in the unpredictability of the world around them. They can provide a sense of comfort, a sense of stability, even when things are uncertain. It's about connecting the dots, and those dots could be about past, present, and future. Really what they give others is perspective, guidance, and hope. My best visual for connectedness is the idea of ripples in a pond. I think that people with high connectedness can be those calming forces that help you understand that nothing happens in isolation.
Yeah, so when we think about connectedness and we think about belief, we use the word belief in the sentence there. And Micah, just for me, contrast those just real quick, is I think sometimes belief also, like this has a spirituality component to it. We said, we used to call it that, and I think a lot of times it does. Some people say in the chat room it means community to them. Can you just kind of quick contrast those two?
Sure. So connectedness is about the links between, and belief is about, I think, the anchor points that create perhaps some action. Belief is a executing theme that's about standing firm on values and having some very specific core values that help direct what you do, what you execute on, what you take action around. Connectedness, I think, has a little bit more of a mystical piece to it than belief does. Belief tends to be a little bit more about, I think maybe belief is the rocks that you stand on, and connectedness is the way that you understand where those rocks came from, and sort of that comfort in not necessarily having to have defined values, but the ability that the way that those values grow out into the world is probably the connectedness piece.
No, very cool. I think we'll dig in as we dig in raw versus mature. I think some of that will come to light. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Let's remember again, and it's going to sound, I hope, hopefully on connectedness, you really understand that raw and mature is not good and bad. It's not the same as basement behavior. But raw, again, gosh, coal is a raw diamond, and it's no less valuable, right? So the raw piece of it is just what might you look for that could be developed. When we mean raw, we mean undeveloped. In many cases, that could be, creating a barrier for yourself or for others. But raw connectedness looks like perhaps open-ended confusion, that feeling and that awareness that something's just not right. Mature connectedness can take that and use it and provide holistic direction. So rather than just saying, something's not right, mature connectedness can say, something's not right, and here's how that's going to give us some insight into the future, or here's where the links are, where the connections are. Raw connectedness is just a gut feeling. And again, a lot of people, connectedness is, it's about creating relationships. It's about connecting to other people. So I've asked lots of people with connectedness whether it happens in their gut or it happens in their head, and they tell me a mixture of both. It's not empathy. It's not, just feeling how other people are feeling, but it's also not analytical. So it's not just thinking about those connections. I think it's probably a mixture of gut and head at the same time, but in its rawest form, it's just leaving it at that gut feeling. The mature use of connectedness is to use that gut feeling in order to build shared awareness. So understanding that it's not a very common theme. It's pretty likely that most people around you are not also going to have connectedness, and so using it to build an awareness that you can share with others is, I think, a mature use of that. Raw connectedness could be overgeneralized, or perhaps over making connections that maybe don't need to be there, whereas mature connectedness is building bridges between the connections that do need to be there. Raw connectedness can look a little bit like you're unaffected by what's going on in the immediate piece, because you're more concerned with where are we all going, sort of the global side of things, and that can come across almost as aloof or unaffected. But I think the mature version of that is helping it to come across as patient, and providing that as patience, understanding, more of a big picture approach to things for others. Raw connectedness tries to sell the connections that you're picking up on. So I think raw connectedness can get, and I was reading, there's a really great stream on our Call to Coach Facebook page about what connectedness looks like this week. And several of you mentioned raw connectedness being trying to convince other people about all the connections that you're picking up on, almost to a point where you create confusion. I think mature connectedness accepts the intuition and understands that you're going to pick up on things that other people aren't, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's 29 for me. I was just looking on, we have a great app that if you're on the iPhone or on Android, if you have not downloaded our Strengths Finder app, it's free. It's available for you out there. And whenever I can't remember, and there's a big joke, like everything's in my top 10. We used to joke about that with Kurt all the time. He'd say, "Where is that, Jim?" I don't know. It's somewhere in my top 10. But I'll own this one. Connectedness 29 for me, and and yet I have some of these moments, Micah, where I love the historical context of things, and context isn't very high either, to be honest with you. But I'm constantly learning history. Like I know the history of the city of Omaha. I can tell you where the very first building that was built in the city of Omaha. I can show you that location. I give tours of the city of Omaha to people who when they come here to do that. And I've always people always ask me that question: Do you have connectedness? So how is that different from, for me? Again, maybe that's a little input as opposed to some of those things. But how is connectedness different than just memorizing facts about things?
Probably the motivation behind it. Why do you like to memorize those facts? What does it do for you?
Because I like to impress people. That's why. It's woo, right? It's maybe an arranger woo combo where I like to know all those pieces. So because I love when I'm telling people things and they're like, "Oh, that's great," right? Yeah. So maybe that's how that fits in.
I was sort of thinking about your combination of input maximizer woo. Is you probably have some history with winning people over based on knowing facts, or maybe somebody in your past has won you over that way. So the way that your maximizer then reacts is saying, wow, there's some nuggets that I can focus in on that are going to be the very best nuggets that's going to help people feel comfortable, help people like me, help break the ice. I think connectedness is a little bit different because you don't necessarily need to use it out loud. It is, and it's probably more intuitive than just memorizing facts. It's being able to see connections between facts that other people would completely miss. If you speak to people with high connectedness, they talk about it being, I can understand the relationship between phenomena that other people would have thought is totally off the wall. So in a business context, it's sitting in a board meeting and hearing data about your customers and being able to say, wow, that is explaining why I had this this person walk into my branch the other day who was completely upset, and being able to make those connections, I think intuitively but also analytically and strategically, being able to be that person who can explain how the ripples all come together.
Yeah, that's cool. And I love, we get to the end of the ripples and we know why it started, how the ripples started, right? From that standpoint. So pretty cool. Well, there's some great complementary themes when we think about that. You've outlined a couple. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So again, every theme can be complementary, but if you're looking for great partners, I think a great partner for somebody with high connectedness is communication. So think about somebody who could give voice to the intuition that you have. I just mentioned before that connectedness doesn't always have to share what's going on because you're picking up on so many connections it's almost impossible to. But somebody with high communication could be a great partner for you to. Think about somebody with high connectedness being able. Jim, I'm going to take your idea now of giving historical tours. So if you were on a chamber of commerce with high connectedness, you could be the person who says, when this building was built, here's what was going on in history, and you could really sense how that's going to affect visitors to your city today. Well, somebody with high communication could put that into a pithy way to sell it and really market those connections.
Yeah, that's a great differentiator there because that's kind of what I do. I love it. I don't want to make the connections. I guess I'm figuring this out. I don't necessarily want to make them, but when I'm told them, I'm like, oh, we can sell these. And so communication kicks in, right? Woo and communication kicks in to take those and win people from that way. So that's great. It's a great example.
Well, and doesn't that give you a really great appreciation for what connectedness is? Since I think it's number 22 in our database of 13.5 million people, it doesn't happen super often. About 12% of all people who've taken StrengthsFinder have connectedness in their top five. But can you think of those times when somebody's made that connection for you where you're like, whoa, I never would have thought of that, but I can use it, or but I'm going to remember it, or but I'm going to tell everyone about it. That's the value of connectedness.
It becomes for me, it becomes an asset. And so I think if you have connectedness, you've got this really important value around things, around processes, around people, around the way things happened, why they happened, right? This historical context. And so reaching out to those with communication, if you don't have that, and reaching out to those of us who do, I love that. I mean, I value it a lot.
When we're talking about historical, just as one example, connectedness could also be making links to the future. It could be making links to the present. It could be making links to ideas that haven't even been conceptualized. It's connectedness, I think, is the if you think about drawing, like, do you remember dot to dots? That you would be able to draw something artistic by just connecting dots in a certain order. Somebody with high connectedness, I think, could notice that you just don't have to go numerically to draw a dot to dot. You could see some relationships between some of these others, and they would add not just lines, but color and texture to those pictures as well.
Micah Bradley asked in the chat, as someone with input and ideation, could someone with connectedness help me be more strategic?
So I love this because I was actually talking to Lisa about connectedness, and she mentioned seeing the links between things, and I have high ideation as well, and I thought, well, how's that different from ideation? The difference is ideation can create and link. And ideation is about the creative aspect of it, where connectedness is more about what's real, what is out there. You don't necessarily need to create with connectedness. I think that probably somebody with connectedness, what they would bring to your strategic is maybe a grounding or a depth in the awareness of what's already there, in a more global perspective for how is that going to play out.
Yeah. I was telling you in the pre-show, I was getting a little beat up in advance today because our Theme Thursday guides are so hard to get to, right? I mentioned that kind of in the pre-show. And, there's a little bit like, I was kind of wondering why this week was, because I get a little bit of that feedback, but there was some particularly strong one today. Not that bad, and I'm getting in the way. So when I make these links difficult, I'm getting in the way of people to make these connections. Like, they want to download these things because it's tools to make a connection to things, and I'm making it difficult. So it is one of those things when you think about it, as people are listing their top 5 out there right now and where connectedness fits in, it kind of makes sense. I'm getting in people's way. They want to quickly be able to get that information in so they can do this. And maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but it's kind of fun. What else? When we think of complementary themes, what else? That was a good one, by the way.
Great. So other complementary themes, I also think about what could connectedness be a good partner to, and the one that came up for me was deliberative. So if you've got deliberative, I think somebody with connectedness could help you not only check for the pitfalls that deliberative is going to do, but could also check for purpose. So again, connectedness is it's a little bit mysterious. It's a little bit about looking for what ripples are we going to create if we drop this pebble into this pond. And so I think a great partner for some strategy, if you're thinking about the strategic development of deliberative, is about thinking through what are we going to do and how are we going to be cautious about doing the right thing. Connectedness would broaden that deliberative in a great partnership to really think about that global perspective on things. Yeah, go ahead.
I love the fact that you brought deliberative in, because that's one of those that gets theme bias a lot when we think about it. And so here we highlight this. Here's a complementary. This find deliberative and let it be your friend. So I love the way you kind of break down that wall.
And that's, as I'm creating these companion guides, my ideation is on fire thinking about how can I find a creative way to change somebody's perspective on something? How can I find something that hasn't been done? Now, connectedness is also going to say, Micah, there's a reason you need to do that, or that this is going to affect somebody someday. Whereas ideation is a little bit more cerebral, I think connectedness helps us understand the relationships as well.
Very good. One more?
Yeah, one more. Abby, you'll love this one because you're always asking about discipline, and I noticed that you wanted to get in this week. I think a great complement for connectedness is discipline, because very often often connected by its very nature, no necessary rules about it. Sometimes it's very curious, but it's also okay with open-ended answers. I think discipline could standardize that approach. So if you've got somebody with discipline, you can really create some great structure, create some avenues for that connectedness to get out of your head and think about how can I communicate this in a way that's going to be a little bit more predictable and a little more stable.
No, very cool. When we think about likely and unlikely pairs, what do we see in the database?
Yeah, so I get to talk for a long time now because there is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-way tie for unlikely. But the most likely pair to show up, and again, this is a random sample of 250,000 completes, looking at what shows up in people's top 5 the most often, it's empathy. And so if you've got connectedness and empathy, it probably sounds like, I know we're here for a reason, and I feel what your part is in that reason. So empathy is about the gut feeling, feeling what other people are feeling. Connectedness is able to think about why we're feeling that way, what the effect of that. Really go in 360-degree angle, 360 degrees of time. Around, maybe we're here because we were supposed to be, maybe we're here because we're supposed to do something in the future. Unlikely pairs, a 5-way tie. Now, here's my thinking about why that might be. Connectedness is number 22 out of 34 in terms of how often it shows up in people's top 5, and only 12% of the population have it. So it's likely that there's a bunch of them who don't show up with it. So tied for 1% of the time, if you have connectedness, you will also have competition, command, focus, significance, and self-assurance. What I think that those all have in common that's a little bit different than connectedness is they tend to be, I call them the self-determinants. So if you look at those 5, it really is about what I put out there and me being part of that cause and effect, whereas connectedness is not so much about me, it's more about what's there. It's about the environment. It's about again, I love the word community that a couple people used in the chat. So maybe that describes why those are least likely, but they can show up. And I think if you do have themes like those 5, competition, command, focus, significance, and self-assurance, plus connectedness, what connectedness would bring to that is a little bit more of a purpose. So competition and connectedness, we are meant to win this. Command and connectedness, I know where these links are and you should listen to me. Focus and connectedness, I'm going to do one thing at a time, and the best way for me to bring energy and passion to a task is for that task to be something that's going to affect more than just myself. Significance and connectedness is probably looking for grander purpose, not just in what you choose to create, but also where you come from, and understanding that there's a depth to the mission that you're meant to live out. And finally, self-assurance and connectedness might look like from within me, I'm confident in my ability to help make connections for others. And again, those top 5, I didn't even write those down, sort of off the top of my head. So if you've got any combination of those 2, please let us know what it sounds like for you.
And just if you're listening to the audio, again, that's competition, command, focus, significance, self-assurance. By the way, if you're listening live and we say something, we blow past it, we record all this. So you can always go back and study it again. Even live, you can go back, rewind a little bit, listen to it again, and then join us live again. There's a little red live button at the bottom of the YouTube page right there. If you click that, it'll automatically bring you current to where we're at. So we've got a few tools in there as well to kind of make this easy for you going forward. Think about, Micah, as we kind of wrap up this part on connectedness, what are some of your other thoughts about how we pull this together?
It's not just about connecting the dots, it's finding the synergy between those dots. I think very often people with connectedness have a process, and I think if you're coaching somebody with connectedness, it's important for them to study what that process is and become aware of how do the dots become clear for you, almost a little bit like a magic eye. So it might be that I need to really spend some time analytically studying. It also might be that I need to, get in the community and spend time with people and just spend some time feeling. But what I'm looking for is that anchoring dot that I'm going to connect everything else to. And that was not my quote. That actually came from Lisa Penn when I was speaking with her about connectedness. She had this idea of an anchor dot, of one important cause that created a ripple for a bunch of other effects. I think about I did some coaching and some consulting with a big car manufacturing company, and they did manufacturing, they did service, they did after service, they did sales, and it was during a time when the tsunami hit, and they were shocked at. How that affected their supply chain, how that affected the way that they sold things, how that affected on the road, how they were going to operate. And there was one executive who wasn't shocked by it, and who, in fact, predicted what this was going to do for them. And I think that about that as an idea of connectedness, of how one event at one place in the world is going to affect you, is going to affect me, is going to have some profound results that maybe we wouldn't have thought about. So if you're coaching somebody, again, help them study what their process is for how they come up with some of those ideas and some of those connections, because I think it's important to give yourself some grace around that. If you have connectedness, don't judge yourself on your gut feelings. I think give yourself some space and some grace. If you need to say, let me spend some time with the details, if that's what you need, then do that, understanding that what you're going to come up with in the end is a little bit more intuitive on the cause and effect pieces than other people probably would. Also look for places that you could be a guide, a counselor, because you've got that quickness around connections. You can probably help people see pieces that they might be missing. I think people with high connectedness are always curious about greater purpose. So, why are my clients really so upset? What's the common theme? How does our data support this emotion that's coming through the door? I think it doesn't have to be spiritual, but it certainly can be. And if it is, I would challenge you to think about what is, just like with any theme, what's the benefit of that to other people, and how can you lean into that benefit a little bit more on purpose?
Oh, very cool. Man, the chat room has been very, very active today. This is the most chat I've seen on a Theme Thursday in a while, so great job, guys, out there as we kind of check in. We like to kind of flip over to our expanding theme dynamics, or expanding your. Why am I having such a hard time saying that?
Theme dynamics.
Expanding your strengths, theme dynamics. So,
guys, stop beating up on Jim. He's had a hard week with lots of people needing him.
Actually, I was in D.C. for the last 2 days, and every time I'm out there, I maximize my time, including getting home at 1 in the morning last night and waking up very early to talk to our coaches. So I think it's maybe that, how 6 hours of sleep, someone recently said, I think maybe even been Tom in his book, 6 hours of sleep is worse than no sleep at all, or something like that. So I might be having that problem as we speak. Let me flip over. If you're watching us on the video, this would be an opportunity. We are going to show you this app. Micah, while I'm setting that up, why don't you talk about this app a little bit and how this works?
Sure. So this really came from the book Expanding Your Strengths, which is available on Amazon in most markets around the world, at least in the U.S., the U.K., and Canada.
Correct.
And if you purchase the ebook, you get access to the app, which gives you some fantastic ideas around theme dynamics. When we talk about theme dynamics, is how does one theme amplify another theme? How do they look uniquely different based on what other themes are there within your top 5? And you can pull this down and pull up a drop down. And our good friend Kurt Liesfeld wrote every single pair that could exist. So there's several hundred pairs, and he challenged himself to, in 140 characters or less, describe what those pairs would sound like. And those are what is available through this app that is available to you if you purchase the ebook. So we threw it out to our coaches on our Facebook site this week, asking them, what pairs do you want to hear about? And I will give you a little bit about my take, and then also show you here on the screen what the ebook says in terms of what those pairs are.
Okay, Micah, are you seeing we should be seeing full screen. Yep. The app that's out there. We have selected some. Remember, we picked these, and again, this week I got a little behind, so we did a fast vote on this. We picked those on our Facebook page, facebook.com/groups/called-to-coach, and the very first one is futuristic.
Yeah, so connectedness and futuristic. Again, connectedness is that relationship building theme. It's about how do I connect to people, how do I build great relationships. When you add futuristic, it's a strategic thinking theme. So when I think about these two together, the first thing that came to mind for me was a philosophic forecaster. So somebody who can help you explore maybe the spiritual reason for where we're going. Visions are seldom small and selfish. You envision the unity and integration of all humanity.
Oh, very good. Let's talk about connectedness and ideation.
Great. Again, we talked a little bit about what the difference is between these two. Again, ideation is a strategic thinking theme, so it's in your head. It's constantly coming up with new and creative ideas. And what ideation, I think, hungers for is a different way to do things. And connectedness is about seeing the links between things. So it's also about seeing the links between people and being that relationship side. When you put them together, it sounds like this. You can see the world as it really is, but you're willing and able to view it differently to get a new perspective. I love these two together. I think it's about creating and connecting.
Yeah, I love the idea of a new perspective because that's sometimes, even when we get into groups and we get stuck, that new perspective can get us unstuck. It's an action item that allows us to get, even though neither one of these come from an influencing theme, this idea of gaining a new perspective means that the group is going to change. It's going to influence in some way. So it's I love that part as well. Let's look at connectedness and strategic.
Great. So strategic is, we're going through a lot of strategic thinking themes here.
No,
Strategic
really
is about constantly asking what if and if then, and always looking for the fastest way forward that gives you the result that you need. And typically for people with high strategic, that plan makes itself known very quickly. When you blend that with connectedness, my first reaction to this was it's selective comprehension. Because strategic can really quickly, almost without knowing it, be selective about the right way to go forward in order to get to where you want to go. And that means that you're leaving all the wrong ways out. And I think connectedness brings some awareness, some wisdom, some comprehension around that. If you look at the guide, it sounds like this. In your quest to promote community, you consider all options. That's a strategic piece. Always looking for the best path leading to oneness. Isn't that a beautiful word for connectedness? Oneness.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that little bit of the sorting in there too, where we think about the best path process going in there. So very cool. Quite a few in the chat room had that combo,
Cool.
1 and 2, or 4 or 5. So, and then how about connectedness and individualization?
All right, so now we've got two relationship building themes. I think about these, when you put these two together, it's people-centered purpose. And you can see the whole forest of global humanity, but you can also identify the unique tree that is an individual person. I think individualization is about that one by one by one, understanding the uniqueness of all the people that you experience, never standardizing your approach because the best way to treat people is to treat them as individuals. Connectedness brings sort of that mystical appreciation of every individual is part of a whole for a purpose and for a reason.
There's an interesting song that I think we learned in Sunday school called Deep and Wide. And deep and wide, deep and wide. Yeah. And connected visualization is kind of that when we think about the whole globe and yet a person at a time. I also think of woo and relator in the same fashion, right? Woo is very wide, where relator is very deep. And so it's interesting to compare and contrast these two. This made me think of that in that sense. While doing the global, and I have relator 7, so woo 2, relator 7, and so I like to both go wide, and I joke, everybody knows me that way, but I do have some very deep relationships and I love to get to go deep in relationships, so we can do both. A person with both connectedness and individualization has that seeming contradiction, right? When we think about this is a seeming contradiction, both global and individual, but this person can do both, right?
I think about this as being somebody who can take a look at a data point and understand. I mean, think about our Gallup world poll. If you went to Gallup.com and just read, gosh, what's going on in the world today? Somebody with individualization would be thinking about, on the ground, there was one person who answered this question, and they had a very specific environment that influenced the way that they answered that. If you also have connectedness, they're also able to say, because that one person on the ground answered that way, it's going to affect their community, it's going to affect their nation. I was working with an organization in the Middle East when I was based in our Europe office, and I asked him a question. I said, okay, why does building engagement matter to you? And one very young manager, he stood up, he goes, you know what, I'm in my early 20s, but I know, and I'm in charge of a whole bunch of customer service representatives in our organization. He goes, but I know that if I can help my employees love what they do every day and love how they do it, then they're going to help our customers. And if they help our customers, I'm going to rebuild my community, and that is how my country is going to make a difference in the world. I'm not kidding you, he actually said that. And I just think what a beautiful sort of calming piece around the connectedness, but also that inspirational part of being able to help people see the connections to a greater purpose.
Yeah, no, right on. I mentioned this one early. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but connectedness and belief.
Yep. Putting them together, belief is executing, relationship building comes from connectedness. Here's what it sounds like. While your strong beliefs sometimes separate you from others, you still have a connection with and a compassion for all humanity. So I think about those two as belief and connectedness. When I was making my own notes, I said it's certainty in mystery.
No, very good. And let's look at the last one, which is next week's theme of consistency.
Yeah, so consistency, again, we're getting a little folklore behind the history of CliftonStrengths. This one used to be called fairness as we were developing the instrument. And consistency is about creating, treating all people the same as a way to show that you are compassionate and that you love all people, really creating standardized avenues of operation that generate a fair approach for everyone. When you add that to connectedness, I think it's you're a just humanitarian, that you have some sort of, I think there's a social justice element to that if you think about it together. So adding some standardization to the connections, maybe the spiritual piece that the connectedness brings.
When we think about, Micah, when we think about consistency, I think this is at least I hear a lot, a misunderstood theme when sometimes on the surface, let me get the video set back up. Sometimes on the surface when people come to this, they think about being consistent themselves. In other words, do I do things the same way? And yet the definition doesn't read that way. Can you talk a little bit about that as we kind of head into consistency?
It'll be a great preview for next week. Consistency is not super common, so I think perhaps that's why it's misunderstood. And you don't have a huge chance of meeting somebody with high consistency. But it is about appreciating predictability, appreciating stability, and creating stability by having standardized ways of operating. I think about the difference between individualization and consistency, and I think about my two grandmas. So Grandma Garnita from Nebraska has 17 grandchildren, and every single year for Christmas, every single one of her 17 grandchildren gets a crisp $5 bill that she goes to the bank, she puts it in the same red envelope, and everybody gets it. And that's how she shows that she loves every single person. My grandma Skippy lives in Kansas, and she starts shopping for people's Christmas presents on like December 26th of the year before. And every single year what you open from her is totally perfect in terms of, she's always curious about what kind of books are you into, what characters do you love. It always seems very, very individualized, and that's how she shows that she loves. And I've never felt any more or less loved by either one of my grandmothers. Consistency shows love, shows compassion, shows caring for people by creating some fairness. And individualization does it by creating some uniqueness.
No, very good. It's really related to people in a lot of ways, and
Totally.
the way we treat people. And
Yeah.
so it's, you can tell the difference when we think of a teacher. Let me get to Carol Ann's question here in just a second. She asked us early, and we didn't really cover it, so we'll do that here in this segment. A teacher who has high individualization and a teacher who has high consistency in the way they teach their students, right? And can you contrast that a little bit, Micah?
Individualization and consistency?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a teacher, absolutely. So I think you're always going to know what to expect with somebody with high consistency because it's about creating rules that benefit everybody, that do not isolate any one person, that really stand up for the good of the whole and commit to that and stick to it. So if you're in a teacher's classroom with consistency, you're going to experience rules and standards that everybody has to adhere to. If you're in a teacher's classroom with individualization, they're going to probably go out of their way to make sure that every single student has a unique experience. And if that means that you have to bend some of those erroneous rules that really don't matter, well, you're going to go out of your way to do that because that's how you show that they're important. I actually worked with an HR person who was in our very first ASC that was international. So I taught the class in London. We had people from all over Europe and all over the Middle East who took this course, and she worked for a small firm, and she was in charge of HR, and she had both individualization and consistency. And she said, it is my job to make sure that our standards, our initiatives, our rules for everybody are fair, and the way that I help people approach those is different.
Yeah. Awesome. And then Caroline had this question about when we think about connectedness in a child. She always loves to get that. What do we see when we think about strength spotting? We think about our new book, Strength-Based Parenting, and identifying some of these things. What do you think we look for in that connectedness talent in a child?
So I love those kid moments where a child makes connections that you didn't realize you were putting out there. So children love to ask why. And I think about maybe some of those why questions that just blow your mind. They're picking up on phenomena that are identified or that are linked that you wouldn't have. So in a child, it looks like great questions that blow you away. So you're driving to the grocery store and they're asking you if they're noticing that you saw the same person with the same license plate at the post office earlier, and they're making those links. Or they maybe you're bringing up curious links about global perspectives. They're really paying attention to things, and they're paying attention in a way that explores the connection, the purpose. I think it's a lot about cause and effect. And it's that almost creative aspect of being aware that there are things going on that are bigger than their little experience as an individual.
Yeah, and they might even bring some of those things up. They may make those connections, and that's when we have those shock moments where we go, oh, wow, I didn't realize that pertained to that, or whatever, right? From
okay, so great kid example here. So my 7-month-old's great friend, who happens to be 11, was practicing piano, and she wanted me to hear her play the song that she had just memorized. And I said, that's great, that's awesome, that sounds really good. And she goes, where I heard it before? She said, Little Einsteins, when I was like 4. She's 11 now. She's telling me that she picked up on some connection between a cartoon that she watched 7 years ago. It could be ideation, it could be connectedness, it could be analytical, but I think it's a great clue that they've got some understanding that things are bigger, things are global. There's relationships between the dots.
Yeah. Very good. Well, we've come to the completion of this. Mike, anything else you want to put in when we think about connectedness before we wrap it up?
I love to think about it as this beautiful wisdom, this comfort in the unknown. Somebody with connectedness can really bring a fantastic calming presence. It doesn't have to be in what they say. It doesn't have to be in what they do. It's how they treat people, and it's how they can build on those connections that they're picking up on.
Very good. A couple references. One, we referenced Strength-Based Parenting, brand new book from Dr. Mary Reckmeyer, which is out and available now on Amazon if you want to pick that up. Strength-Based Parenting, right there. Micah, hold it up and say something again.
Oh, hey, this is Strengths-Based Parenting right here.
There we go. Okay, that is available. We also talked about in the chat room some domains of leadership concepts, and those come right out of our Strengths-Based Leadership book, which is available, been out for a while now. If you want to pick that up, that's got all those pieces in there if you want to read more about our domains of leadership. That was a conversation going on inside the chat room, which is a good reason why you should join us live each week. We're out here each Thursday, mostly now here at noon Central, noon Eastern, and available to listen live. A great chat room today. You guys were on fire. This is the most we've had in chat and the most conversation we've had in chat. I had a hard time keeping up with you guys today, but you can join us live. If you can't join us live, everything's available in a recorded form, both on YouTube and as available as an RSS feed, which just means you can download it to your phone really easy and listen to it in the car, on a train, in a plane, right? Recapture that time that you're traveling.
On the treadmill.
On the treadmill is a great way to get it done as well. Any of those times, walking the dog, any of those things. Although if you're out walking with someone else, talk to them. Don't do it. We encourage you to get that done as well and have all kinds of options that are available for you. Normally we take calls, but we are going to not do that today. We just are up against some time constraints, and so sorry about that if you're hoping to call in. Of course, take that conversation to the Facebook page. That's a great way to come in and jump in. We've got some great blogs going on too, Mike. I'm going to say the numbers have been dynamite on the coaches blog, and some really important stuff being written out there and being read out there on the coaches blog. So again, coaching.gallup.com. Any one particular blog you want to highlight at the moment that you just feel really about?
We just posted one that's written by a Gallup writer interviewing Mark Pogue at the CliftonStrengths Institute at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Go Big Red. But really, it's a revolutionary take on how do we help students really understand what they do best and plan for a life that's built around that. So check it out. Honestly, just to simplify everything, since we all don't have a ranger, we're not all lucky enough like Jim to have a ranger to keep track of all these pieces. Coaching.gallup.com is now where you can find anything you need. So be sure to continue this conversation. Also on our Facebook page this week, for some reason, there's seems like a whole lot more action around our theme of the week. So sorry we get to your calls this way. I think it was worth it to hear Jim and to really explore those theme dynamics. Please continue that on the Facebook conversation.
Yeah, lots of great free resources for you available that are out there. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center. That's really the center of buying codes and all the activities, finding a coach. It's all available on our Strengths Center, GallupStrengthsCenter.com. You can send us your questions or comments. If you'd like to be a guest blogger, maybe you'd like to write for us, that would be Micah would be interested in that. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line so we know how to route that. You can also catch recorded audio and video. I told you how to do that all on the Coach's blog. Links to our Facebook group, YouTube page, iTunes, and RSS feeds, iPhone and Android apps for your phone. Those are available for free if you want to get that, including the upgrade to the Gallup Weekly Strengths Wisdom piece. It's all on the Coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach as well, all of our courses are listed out on our new courses page, just courses.gallup.com. You can send an email to certification@gallup.com if you have questions around that. So lots of ways to get in contact with us, and we'd love to have you do that if you're interested in doing that. And if you found this helpful, we'd ask that you share it. That's a great way to help us get the word out, and thanks for joining us today. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.